This startup is a unicorn with a virtual monopoly in India's intra-city logistics sector. But even though it did over 2,700 crores in revenue last year, I bet you've never even heard their name. This is the story of Porter and how they became the only organized player in the 3 lakh crore intra-city logistics sector of India with over 1.3 crore customers. And in this video, I will tell you about the 3 strategies that Porter used to crack the highly fragmented and disorganized intra-city transportation business. It all started in 2014 with the co-founders Pranav and Uttam, who were 2 alumni of IIT Kharagpur working at JP Morgan. Both of them were inspired by Uber's use of technology, where it had successfully bridged the gap between cab drivers and customers. But they noticed that there was a similar problem with light commercial vehicle drivers as well. So they ended up speaking to over 500 truck drivers and discovered that the entire sector was massively inefficient. Because even though a driver could easily do 4 to 5 trips or deliveries a day, drivers were averaging just 1 to 2 trips per day. And this was part of a larger inefficiency that troubles the entire logistics sector of our country. You see, while developed nations like the US and Japan spend 8% of their GDP on logistics and China spends around 10%, India spends around 14% of its GDP on logistics. Even the average logistics cost among BRICS countries, which are at par with India, is 11%. So this means that logistics in India are almost twice as inefficient and expensive as they should be. Now, logistics are of 2 types. Intercity, where the shipments are sent long distance from one city to another city, and intra-city, where shipments move short distances within the same city. And back in 2014, intercity was being catered to by giants like Delivery and Blue Dart. But the intra-city sector was highly fragmented and filled with small, local players. So the 2 co-founders decided to build an Uber for intra-city logistics, and they launched Porter in 2014. Now let's get into the first strategy behind Porter's success, which was bridging the gap between the supply and the demand. See, Porter's aim was to solve the logistics for Indian MSMEs. MSMEs are micro, small and medium enterprise businesses that have a revenue of less than 250 crores. Now, any business owner will need to receive and send raw materials and final products, right? And for that, they will need a commercial vehicle like a 3-wheeler or a Tata Ace. So the 2 parties involved in this value chain are the business owner and the vehicle driver. And in 2014, Pranav and Uttam realized that both of them faced 3 major problems. Let's talk about the drivers first. The first major problem for drivers was a fragmented market, where they had no single place to find new customers. I mean, imagine yourself as the driver. How do you find new customers? You could approach factories one by one and ask if they have any shipments, but that is impractical, right? So they had 2 options. One was to work on a virtual contract with 3 to 4 MSMEs in the same area and wait around that area the entire day to be available for them. The second was to work with transport agents and brokers who would exploit them for profits. So both of them sucked. This gave rise to the second problem for drivers, which was low vehicle utilization, which means that while they could easily make 4 to 5 trips a day, they were only getting 1 to 2 trips a day. That is an asset utilization of just 30%. Because not only did a driver get insufficient trips every single day, but he almost always had to return from the destination with his vehicle empty, wasting time and fuel on that return journey. And these 2 problems gave rise to the third problem of unpredictable income, because MSMEs may or may not have a regular requirement. So a driver might get 3 trips today but only 1 trip a day for the rest of the week, and he could do nothing about it. On the other hand, the customers or MSME owners also had 3 problems, and the first was pricing. Because after sitting idle at the local adda for more than half the working day and knowing that he will return with an empty vehicle, the drivers overcharged customers. That was the only way for them to break even, because they had to get the money for 5 trips by doing just 2 trips. The second problem for customers was that the entire process was extremely inefficient, because booking a driver was dreadful. You had to make several calls, negotiate prices every time based on the location, and then wait for the driver to arrive, who was almost always late. And the third problem was that this method was outdated. At a time when you have real-time delivery tracking of almost everything, neither the customers nor their recipients knew the location or delivery time of the vehicle once it left. And you had to explain the directions to the driver for every new destination, which again took a lot of time. So the problem statement was crystal clear. It was a pure matchmaking issue where drivers and customers needed each other but could not find them. And Pranav and Uttam solved this by introducing Porter, a one-stop platform that connects drivers and customers looking for each other in the same area. Porter solved all the problems for drivers. It connected them with a lot of customers all across the city, so they were not dependent on a handful of business owners anymore. And with so many options, Porter literally doubled the number of daily trips for the drivers, which also gave them a much more predictable income where they were assured of getting 4 to 5 trips every single day. But it was also a game changer for customers, because now that the drivers knew that they would have multiple trips a day, they no longer felt the need to overcharge and still made more money. So customers got cheaper rides. It was a real win-win situation. And since Porter was a centralized platform where the prices were determined based on distance, customers no longer had to spend time on call negotiating. Porter even has a strict cancellation policy where a driver who cancels rides twice is blacklisted. And this has also turned out to be the real moat of Porter. It is a two-sided marketplace which is heavily driven by network effects, so it is not easy for any competition to replicate it. Unlike a tech-savvy customer who checks for prices on both Ola and Uber and chooses the cheapest option, it is difficult to change the habits of traditional businessmen in the MSME world, which benefits Porter. And Porter has over 1 crore customers and more than 5 lakh delivery partners today. But where Porter really nailed it was with their second strategy, where they leveraged technology to offer an experience to drivers and customers like never before. You see, initially Porter had no app at all, so all the work was done manually by just phone calls and a Google Sheet, where Uttam used to onboard truck drivers while Pranav used to find customers. Therefore, whenever a customer came with a requirement, they used to manually call and check with drivers if they were available and then connect them with customers. Now, initially their pitch was simple: book from us because we are 20% cheaper. And this model actually worked, because in less than a year, Porter had over 500 customers with over 3,000 bookings every month. However, they soon realized that this manual operation was not scalable. So they roped in Vikas Chaudhary, a tech guy and an old friend, who became the third co-founder and helped them build their application. So by 2015, the Porter app was live, and it changed the way intra-city logistics worked forever. The phone calls and Google Sheets were gone, and the drivers and customers were now connected in real time. But the app was a real disruptor because it introduced GPS tracking, where drivers and customers could always see each other. So that increased delivery speeds and significantly brought down the average trip duration, which meant that customers got quicker deliveries and drivers got time to do even more trips in a day. However, Porter's smart algorithms also addressed one of the most major inefficiencies that existed before, which was empty return trips for drivers. Because Porter's algorithms now ensure that 80% of their drivers receive orders on return trips, increasing their earnings by another 20 to 30%. And then the app introduced features that never existed before. The customers could add multiple stops along the way, so they didn't need to book multiple vehicles. And the app introduced a per minute charge for loading and unloading of goods, so the process became even faster. In fact, the app was so efficient that in 2018, the Mahindra Group merged their logistics platform SmartShift with Porter and invested an additional $10 million. Now let's move on to their third strategy, which was strategic expansion. You see, back in 2015 when Porter started, there were as many as 74 on-demand intra-city trucking startups that were already funded, like Carrier, TruckSumo and Cargo-G, and all of them wanted to be the Uber for trucks. But today there is only one. Porter stands alone with a virtual monopoly. So how did Porter do it? Well, a major reason for Porter's success has been its calculated and clever expansion strategy. Because Porter had an early debacle that served as a life lesson on the importance of strategic expansion. So in 2015, Porter was doing well and it was flush with VC money. So they decided to expand into intercity logistics as well, where they would offer transport services between different cities and even different states. They poured a lot of money into it and built a dedicated team for intercity with over 50 members in just 4 months. But that turned out to be a huge mistake, because intercity was a completely different beast that needed a different business model, something that Porter was just not ready to tackle yet. So Porter had to scale down and eventually lay off the entire division. And that was when the founders vowed to never lose focus on their core competency again, which was building a profitable intra-city logistics platform. And since then, Porter has been using just two levers to grow the business. One is category expansion, where they go deeper but in the same markets and same cities. Like along with Tata Ace trucks, they launch Omni vans and two-wheelers as well. The second lever is geography expansion, where they increase the number of cities and touch points that they serve. So Porter has been slowly adding 3 to 4 cities annually, and now it is present in about 22 cities. Now, while the majority of revenue still comes from the top 7 to 8 metro cities, Porter is betting on India's growth story because it knows that non-metro cities are where tomorrow's growth will happen. Uttam says that it's just the top 35 to 40 cities of India where their model would be successful, and that is where they plan to expand. Another reason why Porter survived while others failed has been its laser focus on just one target group, which was MSMEs. Because Porter could have also worked only with giants like Amazon or ITC, as they also need to move a lot of goods within the same city every single day. But that would make Porter overly dependent on a handful of customers, which is always dangerous. And these large players often have a delayed payment cycle of up to 90 days, which could create cash flow troubles for Porter. So Porter stuck to MSMEs instead, which was a genius move, because not only do they make immediate payments, but the return on the investment that Porter makes to acquire these customers is also very high, where even if Porter spends 700 rupees to acquire a business owner as a customer, he will book multiple trips and keep coming back month after month. Porter does work with large customers like Amazon or Flipkart, but not on a contract model. It's always on demand and usually just for their peak festive seasons. And finally, after mastering intra-city, Porter has done some expansion where it now offers packers and movers services, and they resumed intercity logistics as well. But the core offering remains intra-city logistics, which brings over 90% of their overall revenues. So these were the 3 key strategies that turned Porter into a rare unicorn with virtually zero competition today. If you want to launch your own D2C store, check out the link to my e-com masterclass in the description below. Like and subscribe here and follow me on LinkedIn and Instagram using the links in the description. Until I see you in the next video, goodbye.